today I am so excited to talk to you more about how I booked out a year's worth of interview episodes and recorded them prior to the end of quarter one. Hello and welcome to the Chaos to Clarity podcast. My name is Maggie, aka your business bestie. I teach female coaches, speakers, and course creators to release procrastination and perfection so that they can get more done, book more clients, and have the time freedom that all entrepreneurs crave. This is not your typical business coaching podcast. We're talking about business, life, probably some wooey magic, and probably some singing or referencing song lyrics along the way. So if you're into business building, making more money, and getting a little bit of a mindset shift along with having a good laugh, you're definitely in the right place. I've grown 3 businesses from $0 to consistent 4 and 5 figure months over the last 15 plus years. And now I'm helping you do the same thing. It didn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't happen without the help of others. They say it takes a village to raise children, and I believe it takes a village to grow a business as well. So in this podcast, you'll find people who help you grow your village, cheer you on, as well as holding you accountable. I'm so excited you're here, and I can't wait for you to listen to each episode. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Chaos to Clarity podcast. My name is Maggie. I'm your host. I'm the creator of the Chaos to Clarity coaching method, as well as the Empower Her Business Blueprint. And today I am so excited to talk to you more about how I booked out a year's worth of interview episodes and recorded them prior to the end of quarter one. And I laugh because this is definitely an episode where if you are interested in bringing guests onto your podcast and or if you're interested in starting a podcast, this is going to be really good for you. So I've done at least one other episode talking about how to start a podcast and how to basically do it on the quick and dirty, right? And just getting it out there kind of a thing. So this podcast is going to be more about some of the things that I've had to navigate and also knowing that my podcast is part solo and part interview, how I've navigated connecting with people, and also at this point in the podcast, how I've been navigating bringing and interviewing guests that their podcast won't air for about 6 months. So first of all, this may be a note-taking episode for you. So definitely if you're driving or doing something where you can't stop to take notes, definitely pause this and come back to it. And if you're ready, go ahead and grab a piece of paper and a pen because I'm about to tell you all the things that I learned from booking out a year's worth of interview episodes on my podcast. And I also want to say I absolutely love and adore every single guest that has come onto my podcast. I love interviewing people. I love having conversations. So it's always good. And for me as a business coach, there are so many people that I want on my podcast because there are so many people that support women in business, women entrepreneurs. Now, if we have talked, I typically have been working with a lot of coaches, course creators, thought leaders as of late, but I am always open to new opportunities, which can be good and it can also be not so good. And not so good in a way because sometimes being so open and willing to talk to just about anyone means that not everyone who connects with me is a great fit for a podcast guest. And when I say that, there have only been a couple of people who I've said, no, I don't think you're the right fit for my podcast. And that's hard to tell somebody no, right? It's really, at least for me as a former people pleaser, it's really hard to tell someone, no, I don't think this is a right fit. So knowing that, I think it's definitely important for you to, number one, understand the scope of your podcast and understand how it can work and benefit you. Now, what have I learned since the beginning of the year, since starting this podcast, that now I have 35, I think I have 35 published episodes right now at the time of this recording. And when this comes out, it may be closer to 39 or 40, which is amazing, right? So amazing. And my goal was to, number one, have fun doing this podcast. That was always the goal. And if it ever felt not fun, I wanted to revisit and revamp what I was doing and how I was doing it, and then shift so that it stayed fun, so that it stays fun, because I want to do this for a long time. So number one, what is the goal of your podcast? The goal of this podcast is to educate women entrepreneurs, and also to educate them in a way that allows them to grow and really allows them to understand that there are so many opportunities to connect with people who can support you. Now, like I said, I serve a lot of coaches, course creators, and thought leaders. And a lot of times when you step into the coaching arena, it can feel kind of lonely sometimes, right? And for me, I wanted to not feel so lonely, but also still have that independence and that ability to unwind. So for me, I unwind by having quiet alone time, right? By not having a ton of hustle and bustle. But I also can thrive in some of that hustle and bustle. So how can I kind of combine the two? And then number two, so we've got what is the goal. Number two, how often do you want to have your podcast come out, right? So is it weekly? Is it twice a week? Is it once a month? And how long, right? How often and how long are your episodes? So for me, I try to keep my episodes anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes, because I know a lot of my listeners are moms who are driving from one place to the next, right? And they are probably listening to this in the car, or they are cleaning their house, they're listening to this, or it's easy to digest episodes in a way that allows for maximum results, okay? So we've got what is the goal of the podcast, how often and how long, and then do you want to bring guests on? Are guests a yes, no, or maybe, right? For me, in the beginning, I wanted this to be a guest every other week, and then the opposite weeks are a solo episode, which up until this point, that is what it has been. And over the last month, I've been planning for a shift. Now, I'm still going to have interview episodes, but they're going to turn into bonus episodes. Now, here is the reason for this. So number one, going back to the goal, like I want this to be fun for me, and not that it's not fun for me to interview people, because it absolutely is. And I feel like I could really probably have just an interview every week and it would be amazing. And maybe it will evolve into that. I'm not sure. But right now, I want to be talking more about business coaching and how I can support you and things that are happening that you can do in your business. So for me, I'm making a shift to going to weekly solo episodes with two bonus episodes per month that are guest speakers, right? Guests that I'm interviewing, which in turn kind of means more work for me, because now I'm turning out one podcast per week. But here is where it gets so much fun. And this could be point number 4, right? How will you utilize your content in your podcast? right? How do you utilize the content in your podcast so that you can have like one big piece of content, and then how can you split that up into many? Because right now, at least for me, right now, at this point in time, I am basically having one solo episode every other week, which, being a 20-minute episode, I don't necessarily want to talk about that topic for 2 weeks in a row. And not that I can't talk about some of the topics that we talk about in the interviews, but I want it to be more consistent. So I want more consistency, which is then going to lead me down the path of my goal, right? Keeping this fun, keeping it entertaining, but also a learning place, right? Where I can go every week and drop a longer piece of content for my listeners. And then on my social media platforms, I can go and I can split some of this up into different pieces of content to really be much more consistent across the board. So I know that for me, I need to do a weekly episode, and that will then help me wrap my mind around, okay, this is working, this is not working. Here's what people are enjoying, here's what they are not enjoying, right? And I can also create content in an easier way. So if you've listened to any of my past episodes, I believe I've talked about the Evolve content method. And if I haven't, it will be coming up. Because this content method that I've created is a way to help you not get stuck in the crazy of creating content, right? For me, the worst thing about creating content is I would get bored with it, right? So I had to find a way to keep myself entertained so that I wanted to keep coming back and making more content, which then led me down the path of creating engagement posts, creating value posts, creating offer posts, creating, posts about going live, right? So really utilizing all of those content types, but not posting 5 times a day. I mean, if you want to, you certainly can. But for me, posting once per day is great. And then connecting in the comments, right? And that goes back to, my overarching goal of my entire business. The goal of my business is for me to show up and serve people and have fun doing it, right? If I'm not excited about it, if I'm not having fun, I probably won't do it. And if you're into human design, right, I'm a manifesting generator. And if we aren't having fun doing it, we probably aren't going to want to do it. It's going to feel hard. It's going to feel exhausting. So making these tiny micro shifts, I call them, in your business, in your plans, right? How can you keep things fun in your business? How can you keep things kind of that bright and shiny? And for me, especially around content, having the Evolve content method, that really allows me to shine, but it also allows me to bring in my human design elements. It allows me to utilize this platform as a podcast, right, to create something. And these podcasts will get transcribed and put on a blog. So there's multiple avenues where this really, really comes into play. And I'm so excited. So going back to the top of this list, what is the goal of your podcast? How often do you want it to be out, and how long do you want the average episode to be? Will there be guests? Yes or no? If there will be guests, are they going to be bonus episodes? Are they going to be bi-weekly? Are they going to be weekly? What is the guest situation? And then number 4, how will you utilize the content, right? Are you just putting out another piece of content just to be on another platform? Or are you going to start utilizing this content to create a large piece of content where from the content you can pull little pieces of content, which P.S. I suggest this to all of my clients, right? Create one big piece and then pull out those little pieces so that you can have something, a podcast, a blog, a newsletter, right? That goes out once a week to people who are not on quote unquote social media, right? Because then you're hitting more than one place, and you're also, if social media should go away, you still have, right? Especially if you're doing email marketing, you still have that place, that blog, that newsletter. So those are the 4 tips that I have for the episode. And now I want to talk about what I learned from booking a year's worth of interview episodes, right? Especially right now. As I'm recording this, it is the end of August. So right now, when I connect with people who want to be on my podcast, because by now people have seen me post about my podcast, they've seen others who I've had on my podcast post about being on my podcast. So people are starting to get more and more excited about being on my podcast. Now, with the coaching industry, a lot of times things shift and change quite regularly. And what that means is that right now, if you were to book a podcast interview with me, your episode would air in March of 2024. Now, like I said, a lot of people would say, oh my gosh, how did you do that? Tell me how. I want to know how. And while, yes, I'm glad I did it because I needed to understand what it would be like to have that big buffer of time, right? So now I'm looking at, okay, if I am 6 months out, right, how can I shrink that time so that I'm more like 6 weeks, right? 6 to 8 weeks is where I want to be. And I have only just started taking interview episodes just recently. So I haven't really taken an interview episode since probably May. So I took June, July, and most of August off from interviews. So now I'm starting to bring more people in because I want to shrink that time, right? And this is why. So in the coaching industry, timing can be quote unquote everything, right? A lot of people will have a 6 or 8 week launch sequence. And if you are too far out, right, not everyone knows where they're going to be in 6 months. Now, do I also tell people it's probably a good thing to know what you're going to be doing 6 months from now? Yes and no. At least have a general direction, right? So if there's anything that I can teach you from this episode, it's that you have to know where you're going in business in order for things to quote unquote work. Even if you're thinking about human design, right? And you're a projector and you're waiting for the invitation, or you're manifesting generator, you're waiting to respond, right? You have to know your direction. Even if you're a manifester and a reflector, right? Like manifestors, you initiate, you still have to know where you're going. Okay, you still have to know. And sometimes things change in your business, and things can change quite rapidly in a coaching business, right? You could be doing strictly one-on-ones, and then 6 months later, now you're shifting into group, right? And maybe the one-on-one offer that you had, that you talked about on that podcast episode, is not relevant anymore. So knowing that, and if you listen to my episode on offer suites, this can also have a huge impact on your podcast and or if you are a guest, so on and so forth, right? Because here's the thing, having an offer suite allows you to have a number of things under one main umbrella, right? Like under my Chaos to Clarity umbrella, there's the Empower Her Business Blueprint, there's Chaos to Clarity Coaching, there are strategy calls, and there's a bunch of other like smaller freebie offers and like low ticket opt-ins. So at any point in time, if and when I am a guest, I can talk about some of those things. Like if the Empower Her Business Blueprint shifts and changes, right? How can if I record something right now in 6 months, that will change, right? Like what it is now will shift in 6 months. So what did I learn from booking out a year's worth of interviews? I definitely learned that yes, it is handy, but also it can really kind of hold me and the interviewee back a little bit, right? Because now I'm kind of waiting to take on, and I have started taking on more podcast guests, but I've had a couple people say, no, I'm not, I don't want to do an interview right now because I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 6 months. Which again is fine, but also something for me to keep in mind. So if you are thinking of starting a podcast, I would absolutely love to invite you to having a chat and talking more about it, because I think it's important to, like I said, understand the goal of the podcast. Why do you want to do this? Understand how often and how long the episodes are going to be, how often they'll come out, how long they are. Are there going to be guests? Yes or no? If so, how often are you going to have a guest on, right? What is the topic that you are talking about? What are the questions you want to ask these guests, right? These are all things that go into planning a podcast, right? And then how will you utilize the content that you are putting out? Because again, if you're making content just to make more content, make sure you are utilizing that big piece of content to then ripple effect over everything, right? Which goes back to, what is your podcast about, right? And that's not even really on my list of things to do right when you're starting your podcast. So I suppose number 5 could be, what is your podcast about? Because knowing that will then also allow you to connect with the right kind of guests. And if you're looking for places to connect with guests, this is probably the biggest question I get asked. Where do I connect with guests? How do I connect with them? And really, honestly, at this point in this day and age, it really can be as easy as putting a post in groups, on your Facebook wall, on Instagram, saying, I'm looking for a podcast guest. This is what I'm talking about. Who wants in? It really can be that easy. There are other steps that you can take to amplify your reach, and that is something that I talk about in the Evolve content creation. And I'm actually opening up a group cohort for the content, for the Evolve content creation module of my Empower Her Business Blueprint. So what I'm doing is a 6-week Evolve content method by human design. Okay, so we're doing both. We're going to go through your human design, and I'm going to help you realign how you can create and post content so that you can really utilize, number 1, the Evolve method, but also utilize your human design in this whole process and really start to connect on a deeper level with your potential clients. So this 6 weeks starts in late September. So if you're hearing this right now, there should still be time to apply. And I'm going to drop the link below because I think it's important that you go ahead and take a look at it, understand what it is, and if you want, you can book a clarity call, right, with me, and we can go over how to understand what it is you're doing and what this really can offer you. So what this includes is 6 weeks of group calls and a whole bunch of other stuff because I literally cannot help myself. So it's 6 weeks of calls, and you'll get a bonus tracker for the Evolve content method. And that essentially will teach you how and where to post and also help you understand what posts are doing better, right? It's also going to help you keep track of who you're talking to, which in my experience, not a ton of coaches are keeping track of their lead generation. And that means, like, who are you talking to? When are you talking to them? What are you talking about? When did you connect? Things like that can really help you amplify what you're doing, and it will help you not scramble to quote unquote find clients. And what I mean by that is, a few weeks ago, I experienced this when I finished up a couple shorter coaching cohorts with a couple of clients, and then I thought, oh my gosh, I don't have anybody else in my queue. But I actually did, because my messenger is always quite full. And there's always people to talk to. And sometimes we just forget that we have these connections. So this whole thing helps you understand all of that. So if you are interested, or you know someone who might be interested in learning how to create content, whether that's in a podcast or a newsletter, blog, and use that one big piece of content to then put out over multiple different places, this is going to be good for you and or that person. This is also really great for the person who wants to get consistent in their content. They want to get consistent because they want to have a consistent inbound lead pool. Okay, and that is where this is also really going to help you bring in and connect with leads who are probably going to be people who want to work with you. So that is kind of the basis of this program. At the time that I'm recording this program, I'm still working out a few nuances in all of the wording, but by the time this airs, it's going to be ready to go for you. And the sale and or pre-sale will be live. So if you're interested in bringing in elements of your human design, as well as understanding how to better connect with your clients, this program is for you. And there's only, I think, 10 seats open. And that is all that I want for this round. And then I'll open up another round maybe in mid-October and start a new round of this. So I hope this all lands well. I'm so excited for you. If you are starting a podcast, or you want to start a podcast, or you've got a podcast and you want to pivot, this episode is so great for you and anyone else who has that idea in mind. So I would also absolutely love it if you would review, rate, and subscribe. You can find the Chaos to Clarity podcast on Apple, Stitcher, Pandora, Google Podcasts, and on Spotify. So I hope you have just such an amazing day, and I will talk to you all again soon.